Plot Armor, One Punch Man, chapter 215. Let's
chapter
get
of
it.
One Punch Man, Saitama is responsible for the death of the world's most popular hero. The cover page of One Punch Man chapter 215, titled The Way Things Ought to Be, features a very idol-style image of the number one
No Fubuki or no one? Oh, this is crazy.
A-class hero, Sweet Mask. Guys, this is the third colored cover in a row. We are now tied for the record that was set with the end and aftermath of the Saitama vs. Garo fight 3 years ago. Sweet Mask's entire right arm was being held by the monster Pesky Clown.
Woo!
Sweet Mask shouted for every member of the crowd to run away immediately. He promised to sign autographs or whatever they wanted once the monster was dealt with. But for now, they absolutely needed to leave. Unfortunately, they couldn't hear the desperate hero over their own boisterous enthusiasm, so in response, they just kept cheering him on. Pesky Clown was in an especially good mood. He thanked the falling star for being the catalyst to his rise and surpassing power, along with his plan to exterminate every human in the amusement park following the hero's demise. Sweet Mask could only glare at the sadistic showman. Pesky explained that by doing so, he'd become an even bigger attraction for the media and gain even more attention from the public. He would even wait for heroic reinforcements so he could slaughter them too. The clown expects to be discussed across all forms of communication, and he plans on becoming the most talked about being in the world. This is like a twisted rendition of Sweet Mask's plans for Saitama. Instead of having his fame surpassed by the ultimate hero, that privilege was on the verge of being claimed by an insidious monster. Pesky called his wicked ascension a festival, one that would continue to make him stronger and stronger. And just like he anticipated, a news broadcast of the event began. The news correspondent let us know that their current location is known as an Narinki amusement park, Narinki being one of the richest men in the world and one of the Hero Association's biggest investors. His son, Waganma, was saved by Saitama and Child Emperor during the Monster Association raid. But before then, he sent in his own private squad of battlesuit-wearing fighters. They ended up being mind-controlled by the monsters, so Sweet Mask nearly slaughtered them all while wrestling with his own monstrous impulses. After that experience, and the death of their leader—
Yeah. I forgot they would, yeah, they went there.
It seems like Narinki cut the squad some slack and hired them as the park security. So they are watching this entire thing unfold, which gives the impression that their fates are now intertwined with the idol heroes. Those battlesuits of theirs were a later design of the same ones used by Hammerhead and the Paradise Group. They were also the precursor to the battlesuits that are currently—
Bro, I'm so ready for the Neo Heroes
being used by the Neo Heroes, all of which were created by the organization, one of the biggest looming threats in One Punch Man. With the impending dangers of the third era that Sweet Mask described to Saitama, inspiration is more necessary than ever. So while the rest of the world may reject Sweet Mask's true identity, I think this'll be what motivates the squad to finally become heroes, which we certainly need more of. But for now, all the attention—
Bro, this detailed drunk, oh my god, it was, I don't know, but this right here, bro, I was so hooked on the, look, you see on the camera? Oh my god, the details and everything.
Buffing Pesky Clown's strength. The crowd had become so loud that not even the disaster level wolf alarm could be heard. And even then, that low assessment of the monster was certainly outdated by now. The scene was unfolding on just about every screen in the nation. And thanks to Sweet Mask's explanation, we know that this world only has one nation left. Onlookers from elsewhere were horrified. Despite reports of injured people, presumably from the beginning of the incident, the hero's fame has drawn in more and more people. His arm began to swell and monsterize within the clown's grasp. He freed himself with a now hulking appendage that shocked the monster. But that reaction turned to one of delight just as quickly. Because the longer this goes on, and the more shocking its details, the better it'll be for the monster's growth. Sweet Mask leapt back. He now realized just how wrong he was with his previous assessment. He clearly underestimated the monster's special ability. There was no doubt about it now. Pesky Clown was currently disaster level demon or higher, and he refused to let his prey escape. Being able to solo a disaster level demon is the definition of an S-class caliber fighter. In fact, despite being an S-class hero himself, Genos lost an arm to a disaster level demon just 2 days before this. Even as the top A-class hero, this isn't a fight anyone could expect Sweet Mask to win. So the misclassification of the monster's disaster level could prove to be a fatal error here. Pesky swung his hammer as Sweet Mask vaulted and swung his body. He kicked the side of the massive mallet. This forced it into the unicycle buzzsaw's path, resulting in the masterful reduction of his opponent's strength and mobility in one fell swoop. This sequence managed to disorient the attacker for one crucial moment. Sweet Mask viciously chopped down on the clown's cranium, forcing
that's nasty.
the monster's teeth to shatter and eyes to lull. The crowd was delighted to see the tide shift in their hero's favor, as previously, this would have been a fatal blow. And it looks like Murata's assistance drew the members of the crowd for this chapter too. But their cheers came too soon as Pesky Clown grabbed onto the man's right leg. He used the hero as his new hammer and slammed his entire body. Now the crowd's mood had officially shifted to one of horror and dismay. One of his biggest fans appeared to be especially distraught as the hero's handsome face was ruined. And this time, Pesky Clown grabbed hold of the hero's head specifically. He plunged the celebrity's face into the pavement with vindictive pleasure. This continued repeatedly as the monster laughed.
Bro, this remind me of when Geno's this fight scene right here kind of remind me of when Geno was fighting with that Deep Sea King. This whole night we got Sweet Mask versus the Clown. It's giving that vibe. This whole time we look at it's giving that vibe. You know, Deep Sea King versus Geno. Now is Sweet Mask versus the Clown. This is all it's giving to me right now, and that's why I liking it, bro. I'm liking it.
When the traumatized viewers begged him to stop, Pesky Clown took it as them longing for the pathetic death of the world's favorite hero. The reporter was at a loss for words.
Bro, they just going crazy.
The monster was undoubtedly focusing on Sweet Mask's face, which was now totally ruined. They prayed that another hero would come along to help him. The monster's cruelty stunned the world. Pesky Clown's brutality was just as unceasing as the exponential growth of his power. Sweet Mask was shocked by how much stronger his opponent had become. The deranged cretin was now a disaster-level dragon. But despite his harrowing predicament, Sweet Mask managed to send a kick behind himself like a desperate mule. The air pressure from it was so fierce that it managed to sever the monster's ear. And the pain from that was enough to make the savagery abate long enough for Sweet Mask to roll away.
Oh boy, he was pounding him in the ground, bro. Oof. This was getting kind of scary, bro.
As an A-class hero, Sweet Mask had never defeated a disaster-level dragon by his lonesome, as even an S-class hero could have a hard time doing something like that. When Sweet Mask got back on his feet,
oh my God.
His visage was flayed and broken like an animatronic in the middle of a landfill. Pesky Clown punched him before
good shit.
He could even breathe. The once handsome
good chick was crazy.
Man was more like a battered Ken doll as he conceded the fact that he couldn't win with his body. Sweet Mask was sent sky high. The monster shot him directly into the Ferris wheel that he and Saitama were on just a few minutes before. With his ruined body embedded into the side of it, Sweet Mask knew that to win, he would need to give up his human appearance and release his true form.
That's what he got to do, man. Cause I'm like, bro, his base form is not winning.
But he also knew that everyone was watching. There was no way he could afford to expose his true identity here. So their would-be savior fell and crashed back down to Earth. And a heartbeat later, the entire structure began to quake. A couple that was still inside began to scream for their lives. The crowd collectively gasped as the Ferris wheel began collapsing. Pesky Clown was overjoyed by the thought of such major property damage. A grounded Sweet Mask was close to one of the joints that had now been severed. His face was now well and truly broken like a mask as he looked over at the screeching wheel. That's when he remembered his conversation with Saitama about the essence of true heroics. Specifically, the mention of how things should be rather than how you're viewed by others. And as blood spilled past his eyes like tears, Sweet Mask recalled the sentiment that we're all humans after all,
bro.
Then suddenly, the falling attraction halted in place. Eyes were wide and mouths were agape. The panicking couple was even more surprised by the sudden stop. Pesky Clown shielded his eyes to get a better look. There was a man. No, a hero, holding the separated joint together with his bare hands. Transformation reverted.
Sweet Mask! Bro, this finna be nasty.
Sweet Mask's true form has finally been revealed. The day that Sweet Mask has always feared has come to pass. But rather than becoming a senseless abomination like he dreaded, he has become more of a hero than ever before. And it is thanks to Saitama's influence. Now, unlike the ones before it, there were definitely some notable differences between this and the original webcomic version. In the webcomic, Sweet Mask actually tore Pesky's ear off
With his hand. It's like he did it with his hand, but he did it with a kick.
with his bare hands. The manga version
the manga like he did it with the kick though.
makes more sense considering the orientation of his body and is a greater display of his strength. And after that, he actually managed to get a barrage of hits off on the monster. But here with the manga, the situation comes across as more grave and desperate with that gnarly shot of his face. In the webcomic, the entire Ferris wheel was immediately destroyed when Sweet Mask slammed into it. This made the monster seem even stronger, which in all fairness may be warranted since he is a disaster level dragon. But personally, I don't mind the reduction of damage since it gave Sweet Mask such a major heroic and character defining moment by saving the people who were still inside. However, this also came at the cost of a scene where Pesky Clown played a sick game of Q&A with the crowd as to whether or not the hero was still alive. The webcomic also included more internal dialogue from Sweet Mask, although it was very concentrated within the span of the public's uncertainty. And this ended up slowing down the pace a bit. So instead, the manga version opted to have a lot of these thoughts peppered throughout the chapter. In the webcomic, Sweet Mask spent a whole page of mostly dialogue debating with himself and rationalizing why holding back for the sake of his identity would be the optimal play. He recognized that some people would die as a result, but convinced himself that nobody would be able to blame him. Ultimately, I believe that cutting this portion was warranted. A contemplation like that sort of undermines the good guy that we now know him to be. And thanks to Murata's incredible art, we can benefit from more showing and less telling. In the webcomic, Sweet Mask remembering Saitama's words was prompted by a broken pane of glass with the bird poop that Saitama focused on earlier. Then, after walking back to the fight, he cancelled the transformation. The manga version has far greater intensity and evokes more emotion and respect for the character. And you know, the fact that the manga's changes have gone back to properly elevating the source material makes me so happy. When this chapter was first released in Japanese, the moment of Sweet Mask remembering Saitama's words actually didn't have any words at all, so I was a bit confused, which I suppose is one of the perks of a web serialization. From here, the heroic career of Sweet Mask is as good as dead. He used to go by the name Secret Mask, but now that the mask has truly fallen, I wonder what name he'll use now. Unfortunately, this reveal is a moment that Mr. McCoy has been waiting for. He already knows about Sweet Mask's unsavory secret, and plans on using it as a crusade against the hero. This is the worst case scenario for the Hero Association's public image, which will allow the Neo-Heroes to rise even higher. Meanwhile, they themselves are a glorified front for villainous activity. Now, I'm sure you guys are just as happy about this chapter as I am, so be sure to make some noise in the comments. We are days away from the release of One Punch Man Season 3, and I promise you that based on the events of the webcomic, the manga will be nothing but mayhem and greatness from here on out. So it is time to get the hype train moving. As always, I'm Slice of
Loved it. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, man. I'm here for it all, but you already know. Link up in the description now to get stuff, man. On my, let's go.